Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
In 2017, India and China saw the Doklam standoff, weeks of confrontation along India's northeast. When it ended, Delhi put its best foot forward. Prime Minister Modi travelled to China for what was called the Wuhan reset. Then he hosted Chinese President Xi Jinping to Mamallapuram in India. The idea was to bury the hatchet and make a new positive beginning as neighbours. Then came the provocation in Ladakh. Not the first from China, but certainly among the worst. The pattern is clear, as is China's intent. Now there's a disengagement underway, but there's nothing to suggest that China has had a change of heart. Waiting for it to happen would be futile, naive, even dangerous. So what should India do next? What should be Delhi's post-Ladakh strategy? As they say, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you how a revamp is already in the works. India's military processes, procurements and partnerships are all being upgraded. We'll discuss. Also on the show, Donald Trump is down but not out. Will he run for president again? Apparently, Republicans still see him as their best bet for 2024. Is North Korea hacking vaccine data? An intelligence report from South Korea says Pyongyang tried to hack Pfizer. Interestingly, the country claims to have 0 cases of the Wuhan virus. What do they need vaccines for? In Myanmar, the crackdown after the coup has intensified. We'll bring you the latest images and stories. And in Nigeria, schoolboys have been abducted again. After an armed raid on a government-run boarding school, we'll bring you a ground.
The House of the French Parliament has voted in favour of a law aimed at battling Islamist separatism. After 2 weeks of intense debate, the vote in the National Assembly House was the first critical hurdle for the legislation. It will now be sent to the Senate, where it is expected to be passed. Belarusian opposition leader Viktor Babariko faces 15 years in jail as he appeared to face trial for corruption charges. Babariko was jailed last year after challenging President Lukashenko in an election that sparked mass protests. Terror attack has taken place in Jammu and Kashmir, 1 kilometer away from where over 20 European and African envoys on a visit to the Union territory are staying. The visit of the envoys focuses on progress made on the ground after abrogation of Article 370 and the recent District Development Council election. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be visiting the Bangladesh capital Dhaka on the 4th of March for a one-day visit. The key focus will be Indian Prime Minister Modi's visit to the country on the 26th of March for Bangladesh's 50th Independence Day celebrations. Meanwhile, aiming to boost bilateral ties with Russia, India's Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla is in Moscow for a 2-day visit. The top Islamic judge in Gaza has agreed to revise a recent court ruling that bars women from traveling without permission from a male guardian. This comes after the restriction drew criticism from rights groups. After Thai police charged 19 people with sedition and defaming the monarchy during their protest activities last September, Thailand's pro-democracy protesters, including some leaders of the movement, arrived at the Bangkok prosecutor's office, where the prosecutors were to decide if they will send their cases to the court or not. Violent protests erupted in Barcelona over the arrest of rapper Pablo Hasél, who had barricaded himself at a university with dozens of supporters to avoid a jail term. Protesters stormed several stores and banks and clashed with the police, following which over 30 people were arrested. Thick smoke rose into the sky over the Italian island of Sicily as Mount Etna erupted. Mount Etna is Europe's highest and most active volcano. The last major eruption was in 1992. Stefanos Tsitsipas has ended Rafael Nadal's quest for a men's record 21st Grand Slam title with a stunning victory at the Australian Open. The fifth-seeded Greek became only the second player to rally from 2 sets down to beat the legendary Spaniard and is now through to his second semi-final down under. Women's world number 1 Ashley Barty also squandered a set advantage in a quarter-final upset to Czech 25th seed Karolina Machova. Spanish giants Barcelona are staring at an early exit from the UEFA Champions League after a 4-1 thrashing at home to Paris Saint-Germain. Lionel Messi's first half penalty was overhauled by a sublime hat-trick from French striker Kylian Mbappe, which has left Barcelona with a mountain to climb in the second leg in Paris. Elsewhere, Liverpool snapped a 3-match losing streak by beating Germans RB Leipzig 2-0 in their first leg in Budapest.
We begin tonight with the latest from Ladakh. After a 9-month-long standoff, we finally have some good news. Both sides are pulling back troops. There are satellite images from the banks of Pangong So. This area was one of the flashpoints. India and China agreed to disengage from here last week. Now we have verifiable evidence of Chinese disengagement. The Chinese military had built multiple camps here in late January. It had deployed soldiers and placed military equipment. All of it has now been removed. China has already withdrawn 150 tanks and nearly 5,000 soldiers. More will follow, but this will not end the standoff. Some flashpoints still remain, and China has not really had a change of heart. It is just the change of tactics. So what should India do? What should be Delhi's post-Ladakh strategy? That's our cover story tonight. India is revamping its defense strategy in 3 broad ways. One is processes, the second is procurement, and the third is partnerships. Processes, India is integrating its armed forces. Procurement, India is upgrading its weapons. And partnerships, India is strengthening its military alliances. Let's take these one by one. First, to the reorganization of the armed forces. It began with the appointment of the Chief of Defence Staff, a position that was created by the Modi government. Besides being the single-point military advisor to the Defence Minister, the CDS, Chief of Defence Staff, was given another critical job: the integration of the operations of the Indian Army, the Air Force and the Navy. General Bipin Rawat was appointed as India's first CDS last year. 1 year into the job, he now has a plan ready. According to a report, the first joint commands are ready for a rollout. What are joint commands? Joint commands are units and resources from different branches of the armed forces. They're combined under a single branch with a dedicated commander. Now, this commander takes care of what is called a geographical theatre. The Air Defence Command and the Maritime Theatre Command could be launched by the month of May this year. And both of these commands will play a critical role in boosting India's defences against Pakistan and China. The Air Defence Command will be set up in Prayagraj, we are told, earlier known as Allahabad. This command will control all the air defence resources of all 3 services. The Maritime Theatre Command will be headquartered in Karwar on the west coast. Its job will be to protect the Indian Ocean, India's island territories, and to keep the sea lanes free and open. This is essential not just for India, but for India's allies as well. The Maritime Command will have assets from the Indian Army and the Air Force. India plans to reorganize its forces into 5 theatre commands by 2022. So we expect 3 more to come by next year. Reports say there will be 1 command each for China and Pakistan. India's defense resources will be integrated into these commands, which brings me to the second big move, procurement. The much-needed weapons upgrades. Work on this front began last year. In the last 6 months, India has signed at least 10 defense deals. This includes 83 new Tejas light combat aircraft, 118 Arjun Mark 1A tanks, and tactical drones worth $20 million. A $200 million deal was also struck for Israeli spice bombs, the ones that the Indian Air Force had used during the Balakot airstrike. Even in the budget this year, the focus was on procurement. While the overall defense budget was hiked by just over 1%, the budget for military modernization has been hiked by almost 19%, 19. The Indian defense minister has said that this is the highest ever increase in capital outlay for defense in 15 years. New and better weapons will improve India's defenses. Then we come to the third major upgrade. Alliances, partnerships, closer ties with like-minded countries could be a booster shot for India's defense strategy. One of the possibilities here could be the Quad, and India is already at it. The Japanese ambassador to India said as much. In a recent interview, Ambassador Satoshi Suzuki said both allies, India and Japan, had collaborated with India's neighborhood, countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and the Maldives. This is to strengthen the Quad under the Indo-Pacific framework. And this would be welcome news for America. The new Biden administration is serious about the Quad. It wants this informal grouping to evolve into a formal alliance. Biden's biggest challenge at the moment is China, and he will need India's help to deal with Beijing. And that brings us back to the Quad. What is the Quad? It's the Quadrilateral Security Initiative, a coalition of 4 democracies, an alliance with the aim of countering Beijing. It's an old group with a new life. The members need it now more than ever. Japan wants to end Chinese incursions in its waters. Australia wants to counter China's punitive taxes. America wants to have an open Indo-Pacific, and India wants respect for its territorial integrity. The grouping makes sense. But for it to make a difference, it must get its act together, speak in one voice and in a language of strength. The Quad must be consistent and proactive, not compliant and reactive. What has it done so far? Why has it restricted itself to mere posturing? Our next story tells you about the rise, the fall, the rebirth and the future of the Quad.
The year was 2004. A tsunami had devastated the Indian Ocean region. The world was looking to help. 4 countries decided to coordinate their response. India, Australia, the United States and Japan. They launched ad hoc operations to provide relief, but the engagement was limited. Cut to 2007. The ASEAN Regional Forum took place in the Philippines. The Prime Ministers of India, Japan and Australia met with then US Vice President Dick Cheney. This was the first quadrilateral summit. A few months later, the 4 countries held a large multilateral naval exercise in the Indian Ocean. China did not like it. It exerted pressure. For the next 10 years, the Quad lay dormant. 2017 came as a big turning point. China's Belt and Road Initiative was expanding. Quad member nations saw what China was up to. The alliance is resurrected with a meeting. The discussion revolved around a free and open Indo-Pacific. This is the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the area around it. One country was declared a potential threat, China. And in 2020, it proved to be a threat. After unleashing the Wuhan virus pandemic, China emerged as the single biggest threat to the stability of the Indo-Pacific. Its increasing assertiveness, expanding maritime aggression, and bizarre territorial claims infuriated all Quad member nations. Beijing is currently fighting a trade war with the United States, a diplomatic war with Australia, a border conflict with India, and multiple territorial disputes with Japan. The threat is real. Quad is looking to evolve from an informal grouping into a formal alliance, because together it has the potential to counter China's aggression. Look at the numbers. China has an army of 2 million. The combined army of India, the United States, Japan and Australia is 2.2 million. Chinese Navy has a strength of 240,000. For the Quad, the naval forces stand at 760,000. The potential is immense, but challenges remain, especially for India. Number one is proximity. India is the only Quad member that shares a border with China. It is the most vulnerable to Chinese retaliation. Beijing has the ability to inflict direct costs on New Delhi. And two is the lack of a formal alliance. Unlike Japan and Australia, India does not have a formal security alliance with America. India sticks to the idea of non-alignment and strategic autonomy. It cannot command the Quad's intervention should China provoke again. So the bottom line is this. If the Quad wants to be potent and effective, its member nations must put their money where their mouth is. They need to establish a formal alliance and speak in one voice without mincing words and hiding behind diplomatic jargon. And at the same time, they must be proactive. Not wait for another pandemic to join hands. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
India's post-Ladakh strategy must focus on the post-pandemic world order. Along with its borders, India must also secure its alliances, its economy, the future of one of the world's youngest populations, and India's leadership role in the post-pandemic world. India's strategy must be pillared on strategic autonomy and strategic alliances. Can the two be achieved together? What do these terms mean? Let's start with strategic alliances. These are partnerships that go beyond trade and defense procurement. They're about combining and connecting expertise with a focus on mutual growth. In the Cold War era, India believed in non-alignment. Today, India is building strategic alliances. It is taking into account the changing world order and strengthening diplomatic ties with an eye on the future. I'll give you some examples. Look at India's ties with West Asia. It is no longer anchored on oil or diaspora. The two sides are also working towards economic and strategic goals. Saudi Arabia has invested its sovereign funds in India. The money fuels India's growth while helping Saudi Arabia diversify its economy. It's a symbiosis for the new world order. The strengthening of the alliance is paralleled by changing geopolitics. West Asia is distancing itself from Pakistan. It's a country which happens to be India's staunch enemy. It's also a country that is growing closer to China. So India and Saudi Arabia signed the Strategic Partnership Council Agreement in October 2019. There are common foes, there are common goals. Strategic alliances are also built on mutual support for domestic and foreign policies. Here's another example, India's ties with France. Over the years, the two countries have had trade and defense ties. The relationship has now graduated into a strategic alliance. France openly supports India's desire for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. France has used its position at the world body to back India on Kashmir. India stood by France when it was being attacked over the Prophet's caricature. The two countries have also cooperated in the space sector. Common values are also crucial in a strategic alliance. Let's look down under India's alliance with Australia. Both believe in democracy and sovereignty. Both are opposed to Chinese aggression and both back stability in the Indo-Pacific. In June 2020, India and Australia announced the elevation of bilateral ties to a quote-unquote common strategic partnership. I could go on because India has strategic partnership agreements with over 30 countries. India is running an outreach program, the scale of which is unmatched. New Delhi must build on them as it continues to push for a multipolar world. Here is something else that India must continue to do: steer clear of taking sides in tussles involving allies. India must continue its policy of de-hyphenation. It has proven to be a huge diplomatic success. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was India's first head of government to visit Israel. He was also India's first Prime Minister to visit Palestine in a long time. Today, India and Israel are working together in various fields, including science, technology and agriculture. At the same time, India is calling for a two-state solution. Here's another example. India buys weapons from Russia, but continues to partner with America in securing the Indo-Pacific. The US and Russia have long been foes. India has found a way to work with both. This is what strategic autonomy looks like. India knows what it means to not be autonomous. We have a colonial past. Our recent history tells us what it means to have our sovereignty challenged. As India chalks out its strategic alliances for the years ahead, it must draw a clear line. Ensure that ties are built on mutual respect for autonomy, aversion for expansionism, Hawkeye diplomacy and provocation. Solving the Ladakh stalemate was India's strategic priority. With the dragon off its back now, for the moment at least, India can now focus on its outreach programs, cement its alliances, rebuild its economy, and with all hands on deck, prepare itself for a much-awaited leadership role in the post-pandemic world. When leaders become bigger than their party, alarm bells start ringing. Just ask the Republicans in the United States, twice impeached by the House of Representatives, accused of leading an insurrection on Capitol Hill, yet Donald Trump remains the most popular Republican in his country. 54% voters want him back in the White House. But to do that, he will have to navigate a series of lawsuits pending against him. Our next report tells you what the future holds for America's 45th president.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
With this, the age of the Donald had come to an end. And for 70 million Republican voters, there was only one question. After Trump, who? The attack on Capitol Hill left Republicans red-faced. Many distanced themselves from Trump, including key allies like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. But for the average Republican, Trump is still the best bet. A Politico poll shows how extensive his support is. 59% of Republicans want Trump to shape their party. 54% want him in the White House in 2024. Since the attack on Capitol Hill, Trump's popularity has gained 18 points. The message is clear. Republicans still can't quit Trump. The 45th president is missing his megaphone. No Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. But that hasn't taken the sting out of his remarks. Trump's latest statement reads like this. Mitch McConnell is a dour, sullen and unsmiling political hack. And if Republican senators are going to stay with him, they will not win again. He will never do what needs to be done, or what is right for our country. Trump seemingly disappeared after Biden's inauguration. He spends most of his time holed up at Mar-a-Lago, occasionally stepping out for a round of golf. But the Senate acquittal has rejuvenated him. He is free to run for any public office. One, in particular, will excite him. In 2024, Trump will be 78 years old, the same age as Joe Biden is right now. If the Republican sentiment remains unchanged and Trump is willing, a 2024 run cannot be ruled out. If not, a successor could be closer than you think. Donald Trump Jr., the president's son, built in the same mold, sharing the same political opinions. The Politico poll put him on third place in the popularity contest. 6% of Republican voters would back him in the White House. But before Trump can sort out his party and his house, he must overcome a series of civil litigations. Prosecutors in Atlanta accuse him of trying to overturn the Georgia poll result. In Washington, the Attorney General is thinking about suing Trump for the Capitol riots. Congress is planning a 9/11-style commission to investigate the events leading up to January 6th, breathing down Trump's neck. On Tuesday, a Democratic congressman filed a fresh lawsuit. It accuses Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, of violating the Ku Klux Klan Act, a law from 1871 that clamps down on white supremacists. Proving any of these charges will be difficult. But the lawsuits will keep Trump occupied for months, if not years. Trump left Washington the same way he arrived, doubted by his party colleagues, loathed by his adversaries, and adored by Republicans all over. And herein lies the grand old party's grand dilemma. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Now to the latest from North Korea. Pyongyang has reportedly tried to hack Pfizer, the Pfizer vaccine. This comes as North Korea maintains it has 0 Wuhan virus cases. Why then would it want vaccine-related data? Here's a report.
Did North Korea try to hack the Pfizer vaccine? The first reports came from South Korea. An opposition leader quoted the country's intelligence agency, the NIS. He said North Korea was trying to steal vaccine technology using cyberware. It is not surprising given Pyongyang's history. But there are some questions. What will North Korea do by stealing vaccine-related data? Does it have the technology to develop a vaccine? Are there enough cases in North Korea to test the efficacy of a vaccine? Testing abroad is not even an option for Pyongyang. Does it have the infrastructure to manufacture a vaccine on a large scale? Even if it manages to do so, can it store and transport the jabs? Remember, the Pfizer vaccine must be stored at -75 degrees Celsius. What North Korea has is poverty and nukes, not infrastructure. In 2020, North Korea was accused of trying to hack at least 9 healthcare companies. Among them were Novavax, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. North Korean hackers reportedly approached staff of pharma companies with fake job offers. What explains this desperation? Pyongyang has claimed to be virus-free. North Korea has not confirmed any cases. Of course, this claim is impossible given North Korea's active exchange with China at the time of the virus outbreak at Wuhan. But it's not all over for North Korea. The country is expected to receive nearly 2 million doses of a made-in-India vaccine. Covishield will be shipped to Pyongyang as part of the WHO-backed COVAX program. We do not know when this will happen, but we can tell you what is happening in North Korea right now. The country is celebrating the 79th birth anniversary of its late Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il. 16th of February was a national holiday in North Korea. It was marked as the Day of the Shining Star. There was a concert at Pyongyang's Mansudae Art Theatre, and look who's spotted attending the gala. Kim Jong-un's wife, Ri Sol-ju. This was her first public appearance in more than a year. South Korean intelligence service believes Ri was staying indoors because of the pandemic. Last year, Kim Jong-un too had disappeared from the public eye for some weeks, sparking rumors of his illness and death. Well, both Kim and Ri are alive and smiling. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
In Myanmar, it's been 17 days since the military seized power. The crackdown is escalating, so are protests against the coup. More criminal charges have been filed against Aung San Suu Kyi, but the army's generals say that they are still committed to holding an election. In the next 4 minutes, we'll get you a roundup of the latest developments and bring you some of the messages that the people of Myanmar continue to send to WION. I'll begin with the protests. The numbers are swelling by the day. Massive anti-coup demonstrations are taking place in Yangon, in Naypyidaw, in Mandalay and in Myitkyina, the 4 major cities in Myanmar. The protesters include people from all walks of life. In Naypyidaw, civil servants, teachers, bankers and nurses have been marching on the streets in support of the civil disobedience movement. In the city of Mola Mine, demonstrators tried disrupting train services. They occupied a railway line and chanted slogans against the army. In Yangon, taxi drivers and public transport employees parked their vehicles in the middle of the streets. This is to block the deployment of armoured vehicles. Most of them say they've quit their jobs in defiance. Not too far away from the site, Buddhist monks were seen carrying out a procession to applause from onlookers. Some say the presence of monks among the demonstrators has added a moral authority to the civil disobedience movement. A vast majority of people in Myanmar are Buddhists and still deeply traditional. The monks are making quite a statement there. The people of Myanmar are also quite young and creative. In Yangon, the youth of Myanmar has been protesting, armed with placards and drums, performing the hit Michael Jackson song, "They Don't Care About Us." The crackdown proves they really don't. Now look at these images. They are from Mayang Mya, a small town in Myanmar where the police clashed with unarmed protesters and then fired rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse them. Such police action is only hardening the resolve of protesters. In Yangon, a vigil was held. People laid flowers and prayed for the recovery of a 20-year-old girl who was injured at an anti-coup demonstration. They also prayed for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, who continues to be behind bars. Her lawyers say new charges have been filed against her, which may allow the military to keep Suu Kyi in prison indefinitely and without a trial. Among the charges is a violation of coronavirus restrictions under a certain Disaster Management Act. Listen to this.
The cases of Aung San Suu Kyi, the state councillor and the president Wu Win-ye, the cases of them were sent up this morning to the Sabudiri Township Court. Aung San Suu Kyi was charged not only with one case, as we have already known, 2 cases. The first one is, as already mentioned, she was charged with Import-Export Act. And the second one is Disaster Management Act. 2 cases against her.
The United States has condemned these charges. The U.S. State Department has said that it's disturbed by the reports and has called on the military to release all unjustly detained civilians and leaders.
The additional charges against Aung San Suu Kyi, I think it's fair to say that we are disturbed by reports that the military has charged State Counsel Aung San Suu Kyi with additional criminal acts. As we have before, we call on the Burmese military to immediately release all unjustly detained civilian and political leaders.
This was the latest as far as the developments are concerned. Like I said, we've also been receiving responses and messages from the people of Myanmar, and we've been sharing them with you on the show. This is one of the latest mails that we got. Dear Madam, it says, people are peacefully protesting against the military coup as usual all over the country, but the military is not only using force but also shooting with air guns and slingshots. They're also hitting women with batons. This is madness, and they are like robbers. Please let the world see how Myanmar's military and police are evil. Well, we've been reporting And we've been asking people to write to us and send and share their stories with us, first-hand accounts. If you live in Myanmar, tell us what's going on there so that we can share it with the world. We also want to say here that we cannot vouch for any of these accounts or images that come from our viewers. This is just an attempt to share their story with the world. We cannot independently verify any of this material. You can write to us, you can mail your stories to us, your images to us. You can also get in touch with us on WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. But do so only if it's safe for you. Most of us have come to expect very little from the SAARC. It's been in a state of paralysis for years now, all thanks to the disruptive tactics of one member, Pakistan. The Wuhan virus pandemic was in fact a chance to revive the grouping. The only way to beat the virus was to fight it together. India took the lead, convening a virtual summit and setting up an emergency fund. But as expected, Pakistan derailed that meeting, shifting away from the agenda. On Thursday, the SAARC will convene again. Pakistan has accepted India's invite, but the question is, will Islamabad play fair ball?
It covers 3% of the world's area, 21% of the world's population, and contributes almost $4 trillion to the world economy. Yet it's been condemned to operate in political wilderness. SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. The last time their leaders met was 7 years back in 2014. The pandemic offered a chance to reset the grouping, to revive the lost spirit of South Asian solidarity. India's Narendra Modi made the first move. He convened a video conference on March 15, 2020. Still early days in the pandemic. It was attended by all heads of state except Pakistan. They sent the health minister instead. India has been at the forefront of South Asia's COVID response. It contributed $10 million to the emergency fund, dispatched technical teams to the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bhutan and Afghanistan, and pushed for collective action against the virus. Not always with success. Undeterred, New Delhi is making another push. On Thursday, India will convene a virtual meeting of SAARC health ministers. It's a workshop to take stock of the outbreak and discuss the best response measures. Despite the air of tension, an invite was sent to Pakistan. The response has been positive. But the question is, will Pakistan stick to the agenda because precedent indicates it won't? At the last virtual meeting in March, Pakistan raised the issue of Kashmir. It was condemned as politicization of a humanitarian platform. These disruptions have forced India to go it alone. New Delhi has sent vaccines to every SAARC nation except Pakistan. 2 million doses to Bangladesh, 1 million to Nepal, 150,000 to Bhutan, 100,000 to the Maldives, and 500,000 to Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. Pakistan would rather have China-made jabs. The paralysis at SAARC has not affected bilateral exchanges. Member states continue to engage with each other, some more successful than others. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan is embarking on one such mission. He is slated to visit Sri Lanka on February 23rd. Ties between the two nations have been cordial. But recently, common interests have disappeared. What remains is a mutual ally, China. Imran Khan hasn't even boarded the plane. But he's already received a royal snub. He was supposed to address the Sri Lankan Parliament on the 24th, a rare honour for a visiting leader. But at the last moment, Colombo has decided to cancel. It's a snub that could haunt Sri Lanka at the UN Human Rights Council, where a resolution is being tabled against them. Pakistan's vote would have been crucial. The pandemic has strained regional groupings. Even well-oiled ones like the European Union have stumbled. In that context, SAARC hasn't done too badly. It's an important lesson for multilateralism. All it takes is one rogue member to ruin the Union. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Nigeria has been gripped by a kidnapping epidemic. Young boys have been abducted again. The script just keeps repeating itself, it seems. Unidentified gunmen storm a school, they scare and abduct innocent children, and it has happened again. This is the second mass abduction in this country in 3 months. The attackers targeted the government science secondary school in Kagara this time. Reports say they opened fire in a community that has never seen violence of this kind. They dragged the children deep into the woods. One student died in this attack. More than 40 people have been kidnapped. This includes at least 27 students. Their parents gathered outside the school today to demand answers and updates. A search operation has begun. Schools in the region have been closed. No group has taken responsibility for the kidnapping yet, but local authorities are calling the attackers bandits, those who take hostages for ransom. This latest kidnapping is similar to what happened last December. More than 300 boys were taken away by Boko Haram, the same extremist group that had kidnapped hundreds of schoolgirls in 2014. Boko Haram's leader, Abu Bakr Sheku, had taken responsibility for the kidnappings. The group had even released a horrific video where the students were made to issue demands on behalf of the group. Nigeria's security forces freed the boys days later, but the horror of Boko Haram still remains. The group's name literally means Western education is forbidden. According to one claim, it has killed at least 36,000 people and forced millions from their homes in the last decade. These so-called bandits are the other big threat in Nigeria. They're known to carry out high-profile kidnappings. Just last week, attackers grabbed more than 20 people off a bus. They demanded a ransom of more than $1 million. The attackers even released a video. It shows the victims, including several children, crying and pleading for freedom. Their fate is still not clear. There are no updates on what has happened to them. These attacks and kidnappings are just the tip of the iceberg. West Africa is staring at one of the fastest growing Islamic insurgencies in the world. 3 terrorist groups are now active in Africa. The Al-Shabaab, that has carried out attacks mainly in Somalia and Kenya. ISIS-affiliated groups that have conducted attacks in the border areas of Nigeria, Niger and Chad, and even in Mozambique. And another group, the Nusrat al-Islam, is active in areas in and around Burkina Faso. This is an Al-Qaeda affiliate. These groups have close ties to local gangs and terrorists. The Boko Haram has a splinter faction called Islamic State in West Africa province. Together, they're now waging a violent campaign in Nigeria, also in the neighborhood, in Cameroon, Chad and Niger. And they're targeting innocent children. Today's kidnapping shows how unsafe these children are in West Africa. Speaking of which, there are more dangers that lurk in the continent. A new crisis has erupted in Africa. There is an outbreak of Ebola in Guinea and Congo. So far, 5 people have died in Guinea and 6 African countries are on alert. The Wuhan virus pandemic is far from over here, but the world may now be staring at a new epidemic. Our next report has more.
Health workers in PPE, mass disinfection drives, and a vaccination campaign. The world has become familiar with these sights in the past year. But these men and women are not fighting the Wuhan virus. They're fighting Ebola. It's back in Africa. New cases have been found in Congo and Guinea, 2 countries that were home to the worst Ebola outbreaks in history. Guinea announced it on Sunday. it has recorded 10 suspected cases so far, with 5 deaths. The country is still recovering from the last Ebola outbreak. And struggling with the Wuhan virus, the infamous Western Ebola outbreak began right here in 2014. By the time it ended in 2016, there were more than 28,000 cases and over 11,000 deaths. The prospect of a second onslaught has scared the locals.
I feel really surprised. Given the current situation in Guinea, we Guineans are struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic, and now with Ebola, it will be a real disaster.
I was in panic. I couldn't even control myself when I learned that Ebola has returned to Guinea because of what Ebola has made in 2013 and 14 in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. We are Africans, we are poor, and if diseases like Ebola or the coronavirus appear in Africa, it is only God who will save us.
Meanwhile, Congo has confirmed 4 new cases this month. At least 2 people have died. The earlier outbreak of Ebola lasted almost 2 years here and killed more than 2,000 people. An emergency vaccination drive has begun. More than 50 high-risk contacts have been given the shots. There are supplies to vaccinate 16,000 people, but it may not be enough. The World Health Organization has sounded an alarm. 6 African countries are on alert. This includes Sierra Leone and Liberia, both victims of the earlier Ebola epidemic.
What is critical is decentralizing the operations to the lowest level, making sure your operations are where the community are, and that the community owns the operations, that your work is community-centered and that you work with the community. A one-size-fits-all approach to community engagement isn't effective. Every community is unique, and engagement has to really, really be hyper-contextualized to affected communities. That's the lesson we learn each time, and each time we improve on that and need to improve on that.
Ebola has an average case fatality rate of 50%, though it can vary by outbreak. African countries are not completely defenseless. Vaccines and treatments have been developed in recent years. New treatments and surveillance systems helped in ending the last epidemic. But the early signs this time are worrying. Guinea has already declared its outbreak an epidemic. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
With that, we are slipping into a short break. Up next, Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.